You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-duh on the internet.
Today is episode 2, and our two-parter about one of the biggest existential threats facing America today, babies, and why we stopped having them. In the last episode, we talked about a New York Times article entitled The Unspoken Grief of Never Becoming a Grandparent. That article by Catherine Pearson was meant to inspire sympathy and understanding for parents who will never get to meet their grandkids. Instead, it inspired a whirlwind of backlash from younger readers who accused their parents' generation of voting for policies and tax breaks that made affording kids so difficult only the upper 40% of millennials could start having families. By going through the issues vote by vote, we were able to determine that the older generations may have been complicit in agreeing to policies that would steal from the next generation down from them. It was, in fact, wealthier elites who initiated the slow avalanche that would eventually bury the next few generations. In today's episode, however, we look at things from the other end of the age telescope. We want to put on our accountant hats and ask, what are the younger generations doing to fight for the families they're trying to start? Why are less than half of young adults actually having kids? Is every American under the age of 50 simply too lazy and too stupid to procreate? And if not, then what is the cost in dollars and cents to have a child in America right now?
So I want to tell you a short story. And it starts with us approaching Rachel's grandmother to ask her to be our flower girl. Have you heard of this trend online of young women getting married and asking their grandmothers to be their flower girl?
No, I've always thought we find the cutest, youngest. I think it's just the youngest girl. And then if we don't have one, we have a boy, and we like that even more.
Yeah. And
that's the ring bearer, right? Yeah. But no,
yeah,
it's age appropriate. It's definitely under 4, boy or girl.
Right. And you're right. The young boy is supposed to be the ring bearer. The youngest boy is supposed to be the ring bearer. The youngest girl is supposed to be the flower girl. And it's traditionally sort of to remind everybody that, like, hey, this is what we're hoping for. We're hoping this couple gets married and you know has beautiful babies and continues the family line. It's one of those embedded metaphors during a wedding. Except we had a little bit of a problem during our wedding planning. There wasn't a youngest in her family. There was a very young boy that could be the ring bearer and was. But he was the only young person at our wedding. We mentioned that during the last episode that we invited 100 people to our wedding, all from her family, who was like very Southern, very traditional, very big, huge family. And even among all of them, there weren't enough children. There was one child. So we had a bit of a dilemma. And Rachel watched online at some videos and saw kind of cutesy, almost like tongue-in-cheek joke videos where the grandmother was the flower girl.
4 grannies in matching dresses sprinkle flowers as they walk down the aisle at the wedding of their grandchildren.
Coming down that aisle first, the flower girl, Georgiana Arlt, Abby's 92-year-old grandmother. And
in various ways, they would come out and they prance around, and some of them dress like flower girls, and they were very, like the cool aunt, like they would be like in a poofy dress and like really ham it up and goof around with it and throw flower petals.
So it's not the cranky grandmas that I kind of associate.
No, it wasn't my grandmother.
That are kind of limping down the thing and not happy to be complaining as they walk down the aisle.
No, my grandmother's an ER nurse, and she would have whacked somebody on her way down that aisle. No, but her grandmother was great. Like, she was so awesome, and she did, she thought it was fun, and she sprinkled petals, and she, grabbed people's, shoulders and smiled at them. It was beautiful. but that was the interesting part, is this huge Southern family and they're running out of kids. That's something we mentioned during our last episode. Our past episode was all about the policies that led to this, and looking at things from the older generation, the older people who will never have grandkids, and it's making them clinically depressed. There are conservatives and liberals alike, and economists on each side alike, who are afraid that our country is about to look like the movie Children of Men, where babies are so rare you hardly see them, and where you hear about, crying on an airplane and nobody gets mad anymore. They just get depressed. Before we got married, the family talked about building a bunch of small homes on the property so that their kids would have a chance to start families. We've talked in multiple episodes how one of the big factors holding youngsters back from having kids who are of the age is they don't have homes. I built one. I helped paint another one for Rachel's sister and her fiance. And now that we've been married for a few months, we're starting to have those really scary discussions about the future. Like, what would it cost us in numbers if we actually had children? And are we willing to risk everything financially, to give up almost literally everything? Because we understand going into this that it won't be like our grandparents who worked themselves to the bone for 3 kids. Just having 1 kid in this current economy, with the cost of education and healthcare so high, 1 kid is risking your entire future.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I'm uber focused on the finances now, because of course you've abstracted all the love out of this whole, you've turned this into a business deal. But I couldn't help but think, so you live about an hour. Well, you do when it's your survival. And then, especially if you're taking care of another person, you don't want the responsibility of having a poor quality of life and having a child that lives in poverty. That isn't doing anybody any favors. That's not some you just. But when I was thinking about you living, Joe's about an hour outside of Austin, does it concern you with what kind of education you could get the kid? Because now it's not just, I don't know, maybe the education system there's great. I don't think in rural it is usually. Or do you have to have someone to home teach or something like that too?
Well, we are going to talk about that, because that really, really plays into the cost. We are entering into a phase in southern states where they're enacting school voucher systems so that kids can be pulled out of schools and either homeschooled or placed in private schools, so that they don't have to be taught either what they're considering too liberal of educations in public schools or too religious of educations in public schools, now that they're allowed to hang the Constitution on the wall again. Or not the Constitution, the Bible. So we're entering a political time that is not going to make it easier to have kids. We are entering a time that is going to make it harder and more time consuming, as well as more costly.
Best babysitters in the world is teachers, right? That's great, right? Take them
Exactly.
to school, drop the kid off school, and have some.
Yeah, very, very soon we're not really going to have that option. Or if we do, it's choosing what kind of political lean you want your children to get raised in. So that is going to be a factor. But the biggest factor today that we want to talk about and have this conversation in real time, just like Rachel and I are having, just like most young couples are having right now, which is, what is this going to cost us? What are the actual dollar amounts? And are millennials being too selfish? Are they soft? Are the younger generations unwilling to put in the work that our parents did? Or is having a child really as risky as what I'm making it out to sound? So you and I have joked about having infinite bike rides in the past episodes. And that's when you grow up in an age where it's not really that dangerous outside. Your parents don't really care where you go during the day as long as you're home for dinner. And just everyone goes on, like, I'm not exaggerating, maybe 10, 20-mile bike rides when I was a kid.
They were journeys. They were that Stand By Me, that movie with the train tracks. That was a real thing. That was pretty much every day.
It was an era where, like, I can't imagine it cost much. Like, I know that it did. I know that, like, education was relatively free. you just send your kid to school, and then like, if you're poor, you get a like we joked about last episode, free cereal box and milk in the morning.
No, but I think tastes were different. Like you didn't get expensive food for kids to eat. Kids ate macaroni and cheese and fish sticks. That was it. And they would have special things for kids that was food that was not healthy and cheap.
Yeah.
And that was kid food.
Right. And there were enough programs in place to where if your kid needed to see a doctor and you didn't have the money, you could do it. It might, you might have to go to the bad hospital downtown, or you might have to like get on, like sign up for a state program, but it could be done.
And I was in the 70s and 80s. I was a latch kid. Do you remember when I told you what that is?
Yeah, where you come home and nobody's home, and the keys under the mat. Right,
and that was very common. And it was okay to just go to people's houses who were, and then there was no exchange of money. You just went to your buddy's house until, what I mean? And everybody did that as a sense of community. So it was lower cost.
Yeah. I was really thinking that I would look this up and find out how much did it cost to raise a kid in the 70s. And I was expecting to be like, oh, it's about the same now. We're just whiners. Like, it's roughly the same adjusted for today's dollars.
It's usually the exact same, right?
We've had so many episodes where I've like undramatically had my bubble burst where I'm like, this seems so egregious or expensive now, or this seems crazy now. What was it like? And then I go back and look at the adjusted dollars. I'm like, no, I'm whining. Like I'm legitimately just being a whining elder millennial, like or whatever. Like it's, I think consumer goods, cars, electronics, like almost everything I look up, it was actually a little more expensive or about the same back in the day. Kids are drastically not the case in this. And there's a Dana Carvey sketch where he jokes about how his parents convinced him to have kids. They were just like, oh, kids are easy. They fit in your pocket. You just feed them a little bit of whatever you have at the table. I mean, like, they're nothing. And he jokes that the biggest joke parents play on their children is convincing them that it's pretty easy and it's nothing and just do it. And then afterward, it's like, oh yeah, no, everything I do in life from now on is going to go toward this kid. From the 1970s, if you wanted to raise a kid, to bring them from age 0 to age 18, and this includes birth, this includes feeding them, this includes education costs, even though education is basically free, they go to a public school. This includes health from 0 to 18, obviously not including college, because that happens after 18. It was $32,000 or closer to 32,800 and something. That was the average. And so basically the cost of a car. Now adjusted for inflation, because we want to talk about it in today's dollars, adjusted for inflation, that is closer to $191,000.
That's a lot more.
So it was expensive. Yeah, it's like if you spent that 18 years saving up for another house. Children cost a house, basically. And this, by the way, this number includes the cost of 1/3 of this cost is housing. So when we say the cost of raising a child, that includes the space that they occupy.
So that's not addition. That's just the dollar amount adjusted, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So this isn't saying this is the cost of a house. This is saying this is what it costs to include a roof over their head and their food and their childcare and their education and their clothing and transportation. So if it was roughly $191,000 in 1970s, that's adjusted for our money. What do you think the estimate is for 5 years ago? Let's go 2020.
Well, it's going to be a lot more. Is it a third more?
It is actually a third more. It's exactly a third more. The adjusted cost, if you had a kid in 2020, you're going to end up shelling out $300,000 in total childcare costs from the age of 0 to 18. And in about 5 years, so people getting married now, if they're not just immediately going to bang out some kids, it's going to cost closer to $400,000 for middle-income families in the urban areas.
So I hope our listeners, our parent listeners with near adult age children are writing this down and throwing this in their kid's face. I've spent over $300,000. You know what I mean? Because that's what you do, right? You tell.
Well, that's what we're going to tell our kids. We're going to turn to them and say, we spent the most money of any human in history to raise a kid. And that is fairly accurate. So if you're thinking, well, again, that's, what about inflation? That is with inflation. That is exactly with it. So but
the good news is you can make payments on this. You don't have to pay it all at once. You're going to pay it over. It's going to bleed you dry for about 22 years.
Well, that's actually the worst part of it is, if you told people up front, if I went around and I told the people my age that, by the way, I know we're recording this and broadcasting it live. But if we went around and told my generation, hey, I know you are struggling right now. You can't afford a house. Less than half of them millennials and younger can afford a house. However, if you have a kid, not only will you not have a house, you will also be indebted for $400,000 over the course of 18 years.
Yeah, forget about student loans. Yeah, this is
right,
which actually pays you back in a way.
Right, it's an impossible amount of money. And we're actually let's talk about how impossible that is, because I want to bring it into the day to day. I don't want to just throw a giant number at people and be like, okay, now deal with this.
Well, I have to ask you, does this cut hard at 18, or what are they considering kids? Because kids,
18.
Okay, and see, that's not fair either, because kids stay at home longer and have more expensive things they need when they're older than 18. Kids don't move out when they're 18 like they used to. They really don't. That's very rare to move out. It's the college kids, and they come right back for summer and spend all your money too.
well, that's the upsetting and disturbing part is this estimate does not include college, and it doesn't include after 18, because if it did, that number swells. It immediately goes up to 500 or 600,000. So you said something very, very important. You said, okay, well, that sounds like a huge number. What does that look like over time? How do you trickle that out? How do you string that out over 18 years so it doesn't seem so difficult, so impossible? So let's pretend, first off, let's break down that number in your annual income. What do you need to have? What kind of money do you need to make as a job? Yeah,
that's right, because this is net money.
Yeah,
this is net money. So to pay 300,000, you have to make 600,000.
Right,
not even make that. That's just for you have your own expenses too. This is just kid expenses. So you almost have to make 900,000.
Excuse me, millennial. How about you cut out the avocado toast and your Netflix subscription? That'll take care of that 400,000. Yeah,
exactly.
No, I'm being very tongue in cheek right now. I am kidding. I try very hard to respect the opinions of every generation, but we do just want to go through the numbers, because the numbers are going to be stronger than any argument I can make. Any argument I make will be biased from my age bracket. So instead, let's talk numbers.
Joe doesn't like old people. That's why Grandma wasn't able to be the ring bearer.
That's why.
He shut that thing down. He said, no old people.
I would rather drag the flowers and the ring on a fishing line up to the aisle like a redneck than to let her grandmother. No, that happened, by the way. It was beautiful and very funny. But there, okay. So let's talk what your annual income has to be to meet 400,000 over the course of 18 years. Let's pretend for fantasy's sake that we already live in a house, or that you plan to live with your parents forever, that you will never move out, and that, like most millennials, you will just live in a basement and raise that child in a basement. Or let's say you were smart enough to be born with generational wealth and you don't have to worry about where you live. We're doing this just for the sake of what does that bring the cost down to if you have a house? So let's say that you have that, and we save 20% of our gross income toward the future cost of having a kid. That's something that's recommended and almost nobody does. Todd, I don't know any of my friends that do that save 20% of their gross income toward the future cost of kids. even if they're in a relationship, even if that relationship is planning children.
No, never.
They would still need. Yeah,
they've saved for vacations and they've saved for down payments for houses, and that's it. It's not American to save. It's American to spend and to charge.
Right, exactly. So let's say that, you know, they're going to do the extreme responsible thing. They don't have to worry about a house. If they want to, you know, and they're having a kid in a couple of years. They're having a kid during that 400,000 period. And let's say that their housing was relatively cheap, like under 130,000. For the remainder, so we're giving a hell of a lot of, let's say it's, you know, they've gotten out cheap, they've gotten lucky, they've born in the right, you know, family, everything. If we just like say all the things lined up for them, they would still need to meet that amount, an income of 60,000 to 100,000 per year. 60,000 if they saved every last penny and they actually did not buy a Netflix subscription or own a cell phone. That was part of the cost. I looked up the costs. I had an AI check it for me. I sent it to a friend to be like, hey, does this look right to you? Because I feel like I'm off. Yeah, if you want to have a kid in about 5 years with the current trends and the lack of safety nets and basically all of the costs being shouldered by the parents, and we don't change any childcare laws whatsoever right now that you know, increase pay for daycares or you know, make it easier in any way. Currently with the trend of things, removing money from schools and removing money from childcare and the costs, what we're looking at is you need 60,000 a year to be poor, to live poor and to afford a kid. It's more like 100,000 if you want to live a normal life. So we have our number. Every couple or single parent needs $500,000 to have a kid, and about a third of that for the house they'll share, and the rest is just shouldered by the parent. These are bleak numbers, and I'm making it sound really, really sad. I'm not the only one. This is what J.D. Vance ran on with as Trump's running mate. This is what Kamala Harris talked about. And we're going to get to those two people because they have both pitched basically the same idea for relieving that income burden. But this is also why we're seeing less and less children born. It's not strictly laziness. And this is being recognized by politicians that it's not just laziness. It is an impossibility coming up. In our last episode, we found out that if we limit having children to dedicated couples who can afford a home, and they have the income high enough to meet that bar, we're looking at less than 18% of citizens of childbearing age. That is not enough to meet replacement rates. We can't meet replacement rates right now with more than half of that having children. So the next big question on our list is, how do we get everyone else caught up? If these, we'll call them unicorn households, where we have exactly what we want, a nuclear family, 2 parents dedicated, that's 18% of people that can do it. And that's why we're under 1.6 replacement rate right now. So my question to you, Todd, is are there solutions to this? If you have read of any,
there is, with the right family dynamics. I'm going to cover a couple of things of some situations where people were able to have children. And of course, the article starts out as a CNBC article, and it says, if you waited for all the stars to line up for everything to be perfect, there's never a perfect time to have children. But one person, they bought a house, they saved and bought a house, and when the children came, the husband is an engineer, and the wife became a photographer and ran her own business. So if you can go into entrepreneurship, and then so she would make her studio at home. So they had a property. This seems a little higher up the social class, though, doesn't it?
It does a little bit.
Yeah, the engineer husband and that. So I'm going to put an asterisk by that one. Now here's a case. This is in Oregon, where they made sure they saved up enough money. So they saved money, and this is kind of what you were talking about before. This couple in Oregon, there wasn't at the time, didn't have a family medical leave policy. So they had to save money like you would for a trip, or like, let's say there was a hardship in your family, like you knew something was coming, a cancer treatment or something.
That's what we're doing.
They saved up so they could take that time off work, and so that takes a lot of discipline, and that one I really get. Now in the net, this is what you could do. This one you're gonna like, Joe. You can move out of this country. There's other countries like the Netherlands where parents can receive cash payments of up to 282 euros per quarter for newborns, and tax credits to help pay for childcare. So there are other countries that are more proactive about this, who are promoting children and stuff. And I think we're going to get to that in this country.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's socialism, and how dare you? No, I kid, but I recognize that it's becoming a such an imperative that we are going to see policy shifts soon. I know that we used to say that, like, I'm making a joke about the Reagan era, by the way. Back in Reagan's era, they used to like worry about welfare queens and people who were soaking up all of the public goods to raise their kids and basically do it on everyone else's dime. But we're realizing that we're going to have to do something like that. Otherwise, we're just not going to have children around. Like it's not going to be the one bad apple doing this. It's going to be everybody can't have kids, like, periods. Just only the most wealthy people can have a child. And we talked about that. Rachel and I had serious discussions about maybe if we move, because in Mississippi, it is currently the cheapest per year to have a kid. It's $16,000 per year. Again, that doesn't take into account a bunch of factors like housing. It doesn't take into account, health complications and things like that. It just takes into account the basic care and the basic schooling. The most expensive, by the way, is Massachusetts. They were over $36,000 per year. So we've had serious discussions about, like, what if we get a moving company that just hauls our tiny house. We buy a slip of land in one of these states, not even permanently, like just for 18 years, and then we move back to Texas or something like that, which would be a hell of a trade-off, but it might be necessary or worth it for some people.
But then the problem I see in that is that the family support. You're moving away from your support, so it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it may not be worth that money. Yeah,
getting on another boat when you have doting grandchildren right there, that you can keep the grandchildren as ransom and say, if you don't give us cash, you will not see this cute. You will not see this cute grandbaby.
I am dearly hoping that very smart planning and very fiscal responsibility will mean that we don't have to, like, come to them hat in hand and be like, hey, we're going to need to ransom your kid back to you or your grandkid to you. But
well, you're going over the economics of it. And that's best case scenario too. I mean, people do get laid off. Things do happen, and especially with stressful jobs in life, mental breakdowns are kind of common.
Yeah.
Someone just needs a break from their professional job because they just can't take it anymore, and then you add the stress of the finances and the stress of whatever the child goes through too. Childs have illnesses and problems,
Right. It's very quickly becoming a question of, like, you're right. It's do you even take the risk of leaving? Like, you joked about move to another country to raise a kid because it's cheaper. They have the programs that we're looking to do. But also you're asking the question of, like, okay, well, there's the cost of doing that. And, like, what if you don't find a job or meet their requirements, or, one of the myriad of things that can go wrong, separating yourself from your support network.
And what kind of parent are you going to be if you're that stressed about money all the time?
Yeah. I know what kind of parent, because that's what my parents were. And it was an awful living. Like, it was fraught with stress and, like, undiagnosed anxiety disorders and things like that. Okay. So if we are talking about what policies would have to change to make kids possible, the ideal situation, by the way, I say all of this knowing that in the perfect world, what would happen is we would have similar to, post World War II, where there are just so many good jobs, so many factory jobs where the companies are responsible for their employers, or sorry, that they are responsible for their employees. They pay well enough that a father can afford to feed their family and pay off their house. We live in a housing market where the houses don't cost everything you've ever wanted. We live in an economy where the jobs are, you stay with them for a long time. You earn a pension instead of a decaying 401k. I know that we say all of this saying that the thing that would fix everything simultaneously is a better economy. But we don't really have that. And I have a lot of very strong opinions about why that's the case. For my money, and I know I'm going to get dragged for this, and I'm probably wrong on some accounts, and I'd love to be corrected on it. I think it is handing over corporate personhood to corporations, letting them manipulate laws, letting them basically dictate policy through massive lobbyists, letting politicians play insider trader while they sit on like councils and committees. We just have a system right now that is extraordinarily tilted towards wealthy corporations, and it's not going to get better because there's no Teddy Roosevelt trust busting that. And
yeah, that's what I think too. I think they would just invent two things. I think they'd invent another Christmas. They'd figure out another way. And then the other one you talked about in episode 1, where the bigger companies who are having childcare things at people's work. And I had a nightmare about that because I'm thinking, well, yeah, they're not doing that because they want to be competitive in the workplace. They're doing that so you don't have to leave and pick up your kid.
That's exactly right.
It's just to get, turning you more into a indentured servant, get a little bit more time out of you.
I honest to God, and I know I've said this on multiple episodes, and I apologize for repeating myself. I honest to God used to be more of a conservative libertarian. And this show, every time we end an episode where I find out that, a corporation is the reason why Kraft Lunchables are in a school, and like putting 1,500 milligrams of sodium into a kid in a day, is because they paid a lobbyist paid somebody. Or every time I find out that the reason why we lost rights, or we lost a decent retirement, or that the laws got bent in a way that doesn't favor people. And I'm not even talking about like our episodes about wage theft by corporations. I'm not even talking about our episodes where we directly attack corporations like Amazon for running their extraordinarily dangerous box factories. I just mean that we have run into so many instances where a company changes laws and it immediately makes the rest of us poorer, and makes houses harder to get because they're running private investment companies that are buying up housing. Like it's just been slapped in the face almost every third episode I've written, trying to use the most unbiased data, like literally using services online to find data that isn't leaning left or right. And it's turned me anti-corporate.
You're a skeptical stoic at best, but
yeah,
you haven't. What I'm surprised about all these years that we've worked together on this, and you do all the research, is that you haven't just said forget it for being wrong. Because when you're wrong, you just say you're wrong, as opposed to most people would say, you know what, this is bullshit. I'm not going to do it.
I have had multiple episodes where we have come back and I've said out loud, we're retracting something, or we're changing something, or I'm announcing something because I was wrong and I had to reread, or I had to be pointed in the right direction. And I'm good with that. I like that. But more often than not, I've hoped I was wrong about how much power corporation has over our lives and how much it dictates our policy, and how much corporation is almost directly responsible for making it harder to have kids. And it's funny that we have a law called corporate personhood, because we don't like people going on welfare or getting support or getting programs that help them, because we don't want to pay for that. We don't want to pay 1% more taxes to make children a thing, but we will pay a ton more taxes to bail out corporations. And ironically, if they have corporate personhood and they want to be treated like people, why are we okay with their welfare, but we're not okay with people's welfare?
Well, that's the old Reaganomics, that it's going to trickle down to the common folk. That if you're generous with them, it's going to boom, and they're going to be generous with benefits and give you all this. But that's not the case, and it's gotten more. It's gotten more and more greedier at the top than it's ever been. It used to be when
nothing
you get,
trickled.
Yeah, when you get severances, there used to be huge severance with retraining packages. Now it's just out the door. It's changed in my lifetime, my adult working lifetime.
There's the argument about Andrew Carnegie that he did all of these things for charities and things like that. You and I had an episode years ago where we talked about the Forbes Fortune 500 list and the Forbes lists of like, here's the top earning Americans and what do they give in charities and what do they give to charitable contributions. And it had like the upper 1% only gave enough to get their tax breaks. Like the way overwhelming majority only gave just barely enough to like qualify for tax breaks.
It's just business. It's not generosity.
Yes. And then there were outliers like Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And there were outliers like the children of, like Bezos and things like that. I don't remember who it was, but like there were a couple outliers that just gave a tremendous amount of money and started huge charities. But those were the outliers. That's the stories that were being published to make it seem like it was trickling down, and it's not. Like, well,
the one I love you tipped at Rockefeller and Carnegie. Actually, to them they turned it into a sport. So they cut throats. They cut throats their whole careers, and then when they got older, they were in competition with each other who could give away the most money. And I love that. So I think part of that was that they were just that outrageously competitive. I'm going to have more libraries than you do, and I'm going to be known forever. And then Bill Gates and that group did it there for a little while, but again, like you said, there was a small percentage of the upper.
Yeah. I remember Rockefeller sent Carnegie a paper vest once during their feud because Carnegie came up poor. And so he's like, ha ha ha, here's a waistcoat made out of like cardstock, basically, paper, to be like, you're a poor guy. And then Carnegie sent back a bottle of alcohol as a congratulations for one of his investments or one of his charities. And he knew that Rockefeller was a teetotaler. He didn't drink.
Exactly. A teetotaler. That's the expression, right? Just a good Christian man that would never have a drink.
But that was my level of investment when I was younger in the corporate spirit and in the capitalist spirit. And now that I've gotten older and I've been hit in the gut so many times just by reading about and recording about, corporate wrongdoing in recent years and how they're not going to make having babies any easier. Now I'm of the mind of like, okay, well, this is not going to be fixed anytime soon, especially because we are not going away from, we're not trying to regulate or make them accountable to anything. We're making it worse. Here's something that I believe that conservatives are right about at the moment. Conservatives think that family values will fix everything. That I don't know if I agree with. That's literally what J.D. Vance ran on, that two-parent households with grandparents who didn't die during COVID, they won't have to pay childcare because the grandparents will take care of the kids. The part I agree with is he says that we shouldn't use taxpayer money to fund things like healthcare, school, and housing as they are right now, because each of those things is being run by a corrupt company who will charge multiple times their actual real value for the service they're providing. That would be kind of like me getting robbed in the street and saying, oh, I don't have any money, but the taxpayer should definitely pay this person who's holding me at gunpoint. Like, don't worry, the taxpayers will pick up this bill, Mr. Robber. So I agree with the conservative thought that each of those things, healthcare, school, and housing, needs to be reformed, needs to be, made cheaper. And by school, I don't mean like hardworking teachers. I mean like textbook companies that charge 4 to 5 times the value of the textbook they're putting out, when I say housing, I don't mean the honest builders who build a house. I mean the private equity companies that own the houses that charge the legal maximum in rent. In healthcare, I don't mean the hardworking doctors. I mean the companies that, again, private equity that buys up a hospital and then makes sure your, very simple, uncomplicated surgery costs you $10,000 to $20,000. But the problem I have with current conservative thinking is they're not offering solutions at all. They don't want to build an alternative to these expensive things. They don't want to build alternatives to expensive college. They're not tackling expensive housing right now. They're not going after expensive healthcare whatsoever. They're just cutting the safety nets that exists around it. They're just cutting the things that let us access those when we can't, because it's harder to build a working system than it is to break it. And meanwhile, the liberal government so far that we've seen in the past 4 years sided with paying the robber. They wanted to pay the companies who are overcharging for these services. Their safety nets basically equated to finding ways to pay the bandit, possibly because so many members of Congress have stock in pharmaceuticals and real estate, and obviously because they themselves graduated from Ivy League, so they want to pay the colleges too what they're asking. Which means we have a system where the two sides are not really fixing the issue. One side makes the money from demolishing the programs, and the other side makes the most from creating programs to get their stock daddy paid. And we in the middle can't really afford to have kids. If you think I'm whining just because it's a hallmark of my generation is to whine, ask the current replacement rate in America. The required replacement rate for us to grow economically and population wise is 2.1. That means we would have 2 kids for every 2 people who die, and 0.1 to just like slowly overcome that with more people. The current replacement rate is 1.6. It's going to slide lower. And
I like the when you said in the intro, it's sliding slowly, which to me means permanently.
yeah.
It's not like it's this. We're just going through this phase. It's like a genre of music that's going to go out. And kids are going to, because that's what it feels like. Like this generation is a little lazy, but then it's going to come back. It's going to be like the baby boomers again from war, right? It feels that way. But the fact that it's going down slowly, and if you really look at the math of it, it's going to be impossible. People are just not going to have children.
Yeah, you're right. It kind of looks almost like a wartime effort. Like we're going to rally and we're going to get together, and every politician is talking a big game about making kids a thing again and making policies that affect the cost of children. And it feels like it's a big movement. It feels big and it feels sweeping. But that's kind of like if we came back home from World War II and we said mission accomplished. And meanwhile, the Japanese and the Germans were still blowing shit up in the background and we didn't deal with them at all. That's what has happened with, holding companies accountable, asking for a wage that would allow us to have kids, asking for them to just be competitive with each other, honestly, to hold on to their employers or their employees. And yeah, the historic twist that's happening right now, by the way, is last episode we talked about how both Democrats and Republicans are responsible for slowly cutting and hacking away at any programs that favored kids. But the Republicans are now beating Democrats in this self-reported desire to fund children with public money. That I never thought would see happen. But that shows also the level of desperation we're at, that Republicans who sided with Reagan, and that's basically the godfather of their party is Reagan. And they're like, okay, we may need to start programs to fund children. So we're back to all of us being welfare queens, I guess. Which that's a very cheap shot by me, by the way. I almost immediately regret that joke, but that's where we're left at. That's what we're working on, it looks like. Having said that, to get over the current childcare problems we have to recognize those weaknesses. We can't have a childless system where we only support the kids in our immediate family. The J.D. Vance solution, the conservative solution, is forget everybody else. Just focus on your own kids. Your grandparents will watch the kids during the day. Like, you don't need a daycare. You'll have grandparents doing that. In a nuclear household, if you need money, Vance backed a $5,000 child tax credit, which is supposed to come from the money tariffs will raise. That's what Donald Trump said. He said that the revenue from tariffs will take care of childcare costs entirely. JD Vance was a little bit more conservative about that. He said about $5,000 is what they'll do for a tax credit. Neither of those have happened. I don't know if they will. It doesn't look like they will, just based on how bad the bond market is going right now. At the same time, Kamala Harris proposed the big solution, which is like I said, it's reaching outside the 150 people monkey sphere. She said everyone across the board, childcare will be capped at 7% of the working family's income, and a $6,000 expanded child tax credit for everyone who has a newborn. So again, one party is like, focus on yourselves and your family, and that's going to be your solution. The other group is saying everyone gets a solution all at once. I don't know how logistically possible either of those are. I know why the liberals did not get another chance. And I really believe it's because they had weak offerings, and they basically were promising more of the same, which is more housing inequality.
Do you remember the back in the day, the Republican thing of why they have more babies so they can make more money, have more welfare?
Right. Oh my God.
It's like the 16 cents or $16 or whatever. You got like that even penciled. Yeah, they just want to have more babies so they don't have to work, so they can work even less. You know,
that's what the welfare queen argument was. Like Reagan's welfare queen, his. Oh, by the way, that was made up. They found out. They've investigated and found out there was no welfare queen that he was quoting about. It was an anecdotal story to get a vote passed. But you're right. We were so afraid of somebody like their like way to
puppy
to
mill.
make money.
Yeah, small business just having babies.
Anyway, currently the Conservative Party is also pushing a lot of policy back onto the states. And I want to leave with a glimmer of hope. I want to say that one state is doing freaking fantastic with this, and they are solving the child issue. So let's talk about New Mexico.
Of course, it's not a big state. I hate to complain, but it's not California.
It could have been Texas.
It's not Massachusetts or New York. But hey, you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. I'm hoping that this state becomes an example as the replacement rate crashes for most other states. I hope everyone looks to New Mexico and they're like, yeah, shining city on the hill, let's go there.
Well, it's like, school districts attract good people. If they're good school districts, right, people want to live there, so that makes sense, right? And just like what you're saying, the Mississippi on the lower side, but if there's more benefits, you're going to attract baby makers. Baby lovers.
Yeah, people will do the math. People will do exactly what Rachel and I did. They'll look at, where is it possible to have kids? If moving to another state allows you even the possibility of having a kid, people will move there. But throwing things back to the state may have worked for New Mexico. New Mexico has oil and gas reserves. They have oil and gas reserves because they have a land deal with the government. They are allowed to sort of like invest and capitalize on their land and the land around those oil reserves and gas reserves. This means that it is just a profit for the state. Like, they can generate profit out of these, and it goes back to the state, and they decide every year what to do with it. Last year, I believe, they saw the writing on the wall. They realized their people weren't having kids. And they decided to set aside 1.25% of the year-end market value of its land grant. And based on those revenues, it was going to go toward child care subsidies. So just the revenues out of its 1.2%, 1.25% grant, it's kicking those revenues back to child care. And anyone earning under $124,000 per year qualifies for free child care.
See, I really like that because it's not so bottom basement low that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's right. That seems that seems great. So you don't have to be
It's-
making $20,000 to be, to qualify,
Yeah, like in Oregon.
Yeah, some poverty wage. Yeah.
I am starting to notice these very high watermarks for people to like get qualify for free services. Here in Texas, the University of Texas program, they have a Promise Plus program where the cap is 100,000. If you make under 100,000, you qualify for free schooling. And I'm blown away by these programs where the amount is so high,
Right.
and I'm realizing that they are doing the exact same math we have done on this episode. They realize that 100,000 is approximately what you need to make annually to afford, like, to comfortably have a kid.
Well, I think that's what I learned from the COVID money, that they did the math just like you said, because it seemed high.
Yeah,
Because they act like what unemployment, it's way higher than unemployment, and this and that. It's like they really knew that. Oh, we've been kind of getting by knowing, but now we have to do something about it, or else it will collapse. So it's
that is such a good, the phrase you use. If it's not this high, if it isn't, it feels like they're like, oh my God, they're giving it out to everybody. But it's like, no, if it's not this high, it'll collapse. Like the system won't keep going.
They know to the penny, and they say, okay,
yeah,
we have to have it at this, because they do it lower if they could. Believe me, but it'd be doomsday.
All of these situations are all these systems. They're not being ultra generous. They're just realizing this is what it takes. The median in New Mexico, by the way, the median household income is $62,000. So more than 30,000 families will benefit, and in a state that's not that populous. Because of this, already, like in a couple of months, workforce participation is already rising. There are families already who have gotten pregnant and are planning to have kids. They don't have an accurate number yet, but their measures are very, very good. And it's only been about 6 months since it passed. We'll link off to that article, but it's wild to me that the moment they make just the childcare, like just the daycares available, and they're immediately seeing children being born.
Well, you should put that in your list. After you visit Mississippi, go to New Mexico.
New Mexico to have the kids and get them up to like age 8, and then we go to Mississippi for the rest. We're just going to go on a tour of the United States.
Oh my goodness!
It doesn't take a village to raise a kid. It takes all of the states.
Please vlog this. I hope Rachel doesn't kill you. Okay,
that's a problem. No, she wouldn't kill me. Her parents would kill me if I whisked their grandkids off to other states to raise them. You would be reading my obituary. Yeah. You'll be doing this show alone every week.
So where does that leave us? We've inherited a system that's made parenthood feel more like a luxury than a birthright, where having kids isn't just an emotional decision, it's a financial cliff. But this isn't just a story about grief or blame. It's a story about turning that grief into grit, about using data, empathy, and a little political pressure to rebuild a world that welcomes children. So, the bad news first. Our biggest voting bloc and our biggest group of representatives have slowly worked to reduce child support programs until only people capable of truly affording children are the 18% of us who already have homes, dedicated partners, and jobs that fall within the range of being able to reproduce. We've determined that this is not a question of millennials or Gen Zers being too lazy to work hard to start families. Between housing costs, poor worker productions, poor wages, and a government that keeps funneling money upwards, we just can't. Of the 56% of people in their reproductive prime not having children, half of those still want kids, and they just lack the resources or access to jobs. The good news: the mood around childcare and child incentives is changing. States like New Mexico are putting small but extremely significant payments into families. Republicans and Democrats alike are finally starting to agree. Maybe going to a family reunion without any children is a sad thing. Because if we just can't work together long enough to fix wages, healthcare, and housing, or if our politicians are making too much money from those sectors to want to fix them, then the absolute minimum might be to pay into our future out of pocket. Because the alternative of what's happening right at this moment, empty schoolhouses and one baby blanket for every 2 tombstones. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
Connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where research links, show notes, feedback, and blog articles for each of our episodes.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.